Let's get into the mailbag. Boy, was it a special treat to get back from my week off and hear from so many people furious that I ever take time off, and also from people who were glad I was gone. Now, to the people who were glad I was gone, you don't have to watch my content when I'm not on vacation. You can just not watch it, and that's totally allowed and acceptable. But let's get to some marginally more substantive stuff, starting as we sometimes do with an adversarial comment. I don't run away from these. Stephen wrote in and said, "You're a woke lefty," but "your" was the wrong "your." Almost a requirement at this point. "You're a woke lefty" joke should be banned from social media for pushing the lies of the Democratic Party. You're paid by them. The wrong "you're" again. And as we sometimes do, we respond simply with "YOU apostrophe RE." I maintain my challenge. I have been accused of being paid for by the Democratic Party, of globalists. I've been accused of being paid for by the Democratic Party, George Soros, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, whatever, for over a decade. And I still am waiting for anyone to present some evidence of that. And it's an open invitation. info@davidpakman.com. If you have that evidence, please send it to me. Jason wrote in about the forthcoming children's book we are working on. Jason says, "David, the word critical should appear nowhere in your children's book. If you use that word, your book will be banned in many places. I suggest using media literacy rather than critical thinking in these discussions, at least where the audience is likely to be media illiterate." I do agree that such value neutral terms as critical thinking, and actually media literacy as well, have become weaponized by the right, who say, media literacy, that's liberal indoctrination. It is true that the more media literate people are, the less likely they all are to fall for these right-wing tropes and ideas. That is absolutely true. But that's because they're learning to think for themselves, not because they are being indoctrinated. And Jason is probably right. More info on the forthcoming book very, very soon. Lizzie wrote in, I ask, should I cover these bogus House COVID hearings that Republicans are planning to have? Lizzie wrote in and said, no, please don't cover the hearings live. It totally legitimizes them. And there's so many people who come to your page. Also, judging by some of the emails and voicemails, people seem to hate when you talk or comment over proceedings anyway. I know. Can you imagine if what my show was is I take the C-SPAN feed of a hearing and I sit there like a piece of wood or clay or metal for the 3 hours and don't say a word. Like nobody's coming here for that. Go to C-SPAN if that's what you want. Lizzie, I appreciate you pointing out the absurdity of that. Who else wrote in? Jeremy wrote in about Trump, anti-vaxxers, and 2024. Jeremy says, from Chicago, hey, David, love your show. I have thoughts on Trump and anti-vaxxers. I believe Trump won't win the 2024 primaries if he is still in support of the COVID vaccine. More and more of his ardent supporters hate the vaccine and the vaccinated. Most recently, Silk from Diamond and Silk. Trump knows his base hates the vaccine, and he needs to change his tune in order for him to have a chance at winning the 2024 presidency. Let me know your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, listen, Jeremy, you're not wrong that it's a little hard, the mental gymnastics required for praise me for the great job I did developing the vaccine, which might be really bad for you, and you should have the freedom not to take, and it should never be mandated. And it's a beautiful, lovely freedom thing for people not to get vaccinated that I got all 3 doses of, speaking as Trump now, or however many doses he's up to, but praise me for it, but don't get it. It is a really difficult place to be in. And the reason it's particularly difficult for Trump is he doesn't have many accomplishments to speak of from his first term. I mean, he claims accomplishments. They're mostly lies. And so he needs stuff to brag about, but the vaccine stuff is not seen as an accomplishment by many of his followers. I don't know what he's going to do, how he will position that in 24, but it'll be interesting to see. Alex wrote in about the double standards of the right and says, hey, David, wanted to point out Republicans were accusing Obama of lying about his childhood, where he was born, etc., despite no evidence of this. Meanwhile, they are A-OK with Santos, who has been caught in multiple lies of a somewhat similar nature. The right has so many double standards. Ironically, they have absolutely no standards for who they actually elect. With all due respect, Alex. Alex, you said it so perfectly. I couldn't possibly add anything to it. You are completely correct. Stephen wrote in about Michael Cohen's show, Mea Culpa, saying, I wanted to mention to you, Michael Cohen has repeated numerous times in his show that you go to different Trump rallies and events interviewing people to show the irony of their positions. I know you've highlighted some of these interviews in the past, but I'm fairly certain you're just quoting or replaying these from other sources that aren't produced by your show directly. I thought you might want to correct him unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, it has been brought to my attention multiple times that Michael Cohen, who's a friend of the show, thinks I go to Trump rallies. It is true that I don't go to the Trump rallies, but we do have our correspondents, and in particular, Luke Beasley, who does go to the event. So we are generating original content at those rallies, but it is true that I'm not the guy who goes to them. If I have the opportunity to correct Michael, I will. Brian wrote in about socialism. Socialism. Brian says, hello, David. I want to ask a question about the term socialism. As Paul Krugman once suggested in regards to Bernie, using the term socialism gives any opposition the leverage to compare one to Stalin. I've heard you state on your show that there are no real socialists in government, and I tend to agree. When I listen to your views on government, economy, healthcare, I think you're pretty reasonable. However, do you agree that left-wing politicians and pundits and influencers should distance themselves from the term? I don't expect you to be responsible for others, but I think it's fair criticism to point out that people like Kyle Kulinski and Vaush turn people off of actual issues with their abstract understandings and glorification of socialism. Okay, I don't know. I can't speak to Kyle and Vaush, Ian Vaush, however you know him. The question here is, should people distance themselves from the term socialism? If you are really a socialist, then you should embrace the term, because that's really what you are. To the extent that the Democratic Party really doesn't have socialists in it, in positions of power, I don't think anybody who isn't actually a socialist should embrace the term, because it's both inaccurate and not advantageous. Now, I know that there's polling that says, well, young people are less negative about socialism than ever before. Young people specifically and less negative doesn't, to me, signal that it's a winner to say we are socialists when we are not. My general view is, in particular, if you're not really a socialist, don't embrace the term. And this, I think, has been one of my biggest criticisms of the way Bernie ran his campaigns. Let's call ourselves what we are. I am a social democrat. That's a regulated form of capitalism. And I will repeat it as many times as I need to repeat it in order to get that across. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. Please sign up at joinpakman.com. We do directly depend on the support of people who get memberships at joinpakman.com. I would love for you to be one of those people. We will see you on the bonus show and then back here next week.